Good evening and welcome to Colorado Decides, a joint production of Colorado Public Television, CBS 4, KOA News Radio, and KUNC Public Radio. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Joining me tonight is Sean Boyd, political specialist with CBS 4 News, and as always, political analyst Eric Sonderman. Tonight we kick off our coverage of the 2018 primary election with the Democrats running to become the next governor of Colorado. Joining us for the next 60 minutes are former Colorado State Senator Mike Johnston, former Colorado State Treasurer Cary Kennedy, current Lieutenant Governor of Colorado Donna Lynne, and current Congressman from Colorado's 2nd Congressional District Jared Polis. Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. We have limited time, so let's get right to it. Sean, why don't you kick it off?
Right. The Democratic primary for governor has moved steadily left on the major issues: energy, healthcare, immigration, gun control, education. Knowing that the most liberal candidate in the 2016 Democratic caucuses, Bernie Sanders, overwhelmingly carried Colorado and that he has a lot of influence right now in the party, is there any public policy issue where you fundamentally disagree with Sanders? Jared, we're going to start with you.
I enjoy working with Senator Sanders. I sponsor employee ownership legislation with him, and he's been a good ally. I don't look at this divide as liberal versus conservative. I look at it as forwards versus backwards. I mean, we're the only country in our state of Colorado in the industrialized world not to have universal health care. Let's get there. Bernie's an advocate of that, and I have been for 10 years. I'm sure there's areas I disagree with Bernie Sanders. I'm sure there's areas I disagree with Hillary Clinton. But what you're going to get from me is a forward-looking future agenda, because Colorado's a state of innovators, and I think we're proud of that, and we want to be in the forefront of reaching 100% renewable energy, implementing models that help the economy work for everybody, not just those at the top.
There's nothing specific, a major policy issue where you
Well,
disagree
you'd have to walk
with
us through all Senator Sanders' positions, right? I don't know if we're intricately familiar with them, but I can highlight the areas that I've worked with them, and I've certainly enjoyed working with them in those areas.
And maybe we can focus on the major issues that I touched on: the energy, healthcare, immigration, gun control, education. Donna, anything?
Well, first of all, I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I like to think of myself as a pragmatic Democrat who's had experience leading large organizations. And when you lead a large organization, whether it's the state of Colorado or a business, you have to make a lot of decisions based on evidence and the merits. And I think the difference between a senator who is running for election is there is this energy around pushing left and getting people excited, maybe around themes and ideas. I think what we want in a governor is somebody who's got that track record. So I would say on things like education, we've got to have a concrete plan. We can't just have a slogan. On something like healthcare, I'm a supporter of universal healthcare as well. I'm not a supporter of the single payer system because I don't think we can accomplish that in Colorado, and our voters rejected it in 2016. And on energy and the environment, I think, look, we all love living here. We enjoy what we have here. It's unique. But we also have a lot of energy jobs here and have to think about, as we transition to renewable energy, what do we do about the jobs that are here? So that's, I think, some of the differences that I would have with Senator Sanders and the far left positions that he's been taking.
Okay. Thank you. Cary?
Sean, Colorado's a national leader. We are a national model. Today we have one of the top ranked economies in the country. And the reason for that is because we work together. It stands in stark contrast to the partisan politics of Washington. We elect pragmatic leaders here who are focused on keeping Colorado a national model and a national leader. We have work to do. We need to make education our state's top priority. We need to do a better job managing growth here in our state because we're all feeling the impacts of that. But the governor, the next governor of this state, like past governors, needs to bring people together and work with both sides of the aisle, work with people in rural Colorado, work with people in our suburbs, in our cities, to build those coalitions and those partnerships. That's why Colorado is successful.
So there's no specific of these issues that I mentioned that you disagree with Sanders on?
You know, I would have to go and look at his record, but I think what is in contrast is the collaborative partnerships, the pragmatic leadership that we have here in Colorado that makes us such a success, in contrast to the divisive partisan politics you see in Washington.
Mike?
There are some things that I agree with him on, and there are some things I disagree. The things I agree with on is I do think that access to healthcare ought to be a universal right. I do think that we want to get more grassroots people organized and involved in politics. That's why we've built a grassroots organizing effort in all 64 counties in Colorado. I think I disagree with him on his proposal for free college. I don't think that's a viable policy in Colorado that we could pay for, and I don't think it's a Colorado value. Coloradans believe that you ought to get something for free. My proposal, called the Colorado Promise, is that people ought to be able to earn access to skills training or community college by providing service to the state. That nothing's free in Colorado, you got to work for it. But if you do provide service to the state, you ought to be able to get access to that skills and training. That both makes it something concretely you can do while balancing the budget, and you make sure that everybody in Colorado's got skin in the game to earn the education that they're seeking. So I think that's a place where I differ on how work ought to be connected to opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, let's go to our second question.
Thanks, Dominic. John Hickenlooper's had the good fortune, we'll say, of governing during an expanding economy for the most part. We're due for a correction here at some point. We're due for a downturn. I think the odds are that the next governor of Colorado will preside, at least in part, over perhaps some kind of economic downturn. All of you, in one way or another, have advocated for an expansion of government. I'm curious, if and when we face that economic recession, what will be the first things you look to cut, and what particularly qualifies you to govern Colorado during an economic contraction? Why don't we start with Mike this time and come down the row.
I do think there's a likelihood that we're going to see a recession even sooner rather than later, and I think there are things we can do to contribute to that or to mitigate that. One of the things we know is the University of Colorado is projecting that recession will come sooner in Colorado because of two big gaps. One is we don't have the people with the talent we need to enter the jobs that are coming. And the second is we don't have an infrastructure system that allows us to move people and goods around the state. So our failure to invest in our own talent and our own infrastructure is going to hasten that recession if we don't solve it. So the first thing I would do as governor is go to the ballot in 2020 and repeal some of the worst parts of Tabor so we can actually fund our roads and bridges and schools to avoid that problem. It's also why I supported, and I know Donna has worked on, making sure we have an effective rainy day fund in the state budget so you're prepared for the next recession. When the good times are here, you got to make sure you're storing and preparing for those, because I was in the Senate through the last recession and you had to make a lot of hard decisions. So I think those are things I would do proactively. One of the places where I would look to make cuts, and it's in my proposal on criminal justice, is in corrections. I think that we can do far better by focusing on stop criminalizing mental health, stop criminalizing drug addiction, and stop criminalizing poverty. Those kind of reforms are some of the few big ideas in the state that would actually save the state hundreds of millions of dollars in the state budget, and that would be where I would start.
Cary?
Eric, I managed the state's finances throughout the last economic crisis. I started serving as state treasurer in 2007, just months before Wall Street collapsed. I was able to help keep Colorado on good, strong financial footing, keep our budget balanced, and I took steps to move state investments, taxpayers' money, out of risky Wall Street investments so that here in Colorado, taxpayers didn't lose money in their state investments in the same way that other states lost hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. It's critically important that we keep Colorado's economy strong and we keep our state's finances on good, strong financial footing, that we keep our budget balanced, we keep our debt levels low, that we have adequate reserves so that we don't have to make the kind of draconian cuts that other states have had to make when they go into a downturn. It's also critically important that we stand up to Wall Street and we don't take our state into the kind of risky investment deals and risky debt deals that have really hurt other states in the nation.
And Donna?
I cut my teeth 42 years ago in New York City during their fiscal crisis. And the city was basically bankrupt. And I was part of a team that worked with bankers, that worked with labor unions, that worked with government officials to really restore financial stability. Let's hope we never, and we won't ever get to that place in Colorado, but I've been through the worst of crisis times to deal with finances. I do think, and we tried in this legislative session to get the state's reserve up as high as 10%. I think that's prudent. We didn't get that far, and clearly we have some pent-up demand for things like roads and education. So it was a little bit of a balance, but I would definitely say that next year we've got to take the tough step of adding to our rainy day fund that we have. The third thing, and I think what makes me uniquely qualified to tackle this is the budget is put together by the executive branch. It is then presented to the legislature, we negotiate it. And I've been involved in that process for the last 3 sessions, and it is really tough work. And we've gotten to a great middle ground, I think, on a lot of budget issues. And finally, the business community is a huge partner as well. When we get into tough times, things like unemployment insurance are going to skyrocket. Medicaid is going to go up more. So how we work on both constraining some of the Medicaid growth, which I've done through healthcare in most of my career, but also we've got to ask the business community to step up. I don't want us to be in a place where we are borrowing to be able to pay unemployment insurance benefits. And if we get to a recession in the next 2 years, unfortunately, we'll be back to where we were when the recession hit here in Colorado.
Last word on this, Jared?
Well, it's a great question. No, I think you framed it as, are we or am I for more government? I don't see it as more government. I see it as better government, because frankly, we're spending too much incarcerating too many people. Not only is it a social justice issue, it's a legitimate issue of taxpayer expense. Why do we jail more people than pretty much any other industrialized nation? It's costly, it's ineffective. We need better mental health and drug addiction support services to address it. Look, I've created hundreds of jobs in the private sector. You know what? Every large company starts out as a small company. I was a co-founder of Techstars, which has led to dozens of growing companies across the country. I also started a nonprofit called Patriot Boot Camp that helps train our returning veterans to be self-employed and to start their own businesses, and empowering people to be able to support themselves and perhaps someday even create jobs for others is what an economic recovery and economic growth is all about. I'm the only one who's done it, and I look forward to continuing to partner with others to do it as governor.
Time for next question. Sean, you're up.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask these questions to specific candidates here. I'm going to start with you, Cary. A new ad by a super PAC that supports you is attacking a couple of your opponents here. You did take a clean campaign pledge. So do you denounce this ad, and will you request that the PAC take it down?
So Sean, I have taken a clean campaign pledge, and I'm only producing positive ads from my campaign. I'm not going to produce any negative ads. And you know, this is an issue in our politics today where there are independent outside groups that operate independent of the candidates and of our campaigns. In fact, it's illegal for us to coordinate. In this case, it's the teachers here in Colorado. They took a close look at all of the candidates in this race. And they made a decision to endorse me based on my record, based on my vision for how to improve public schools in this state. And that this is an ad that they have produced to communicate. There are differences in our approaches to education policy, and it's important that the teachers have the ability to express their opinion in a race that matters to them.
But yes or no, do you denounce the ad since it is an attack ad and you did take this pledge?
I don't like negative campaigning, but this was the teacher's ad, not mine.
Can I jump in on that, Sean?
So I do. I mean, it does attack you. Yes. You're one of the candidates that it attacks. So I guess we can jump to you first. You know, the ad accuses you of pushing this conservative anti-teacher bill. You want to respond?
Yeah, there's so many things that are disappointing about the ad. One of the funny things was what conservative they were referring to. I don't know if it was Barack Obama that they were referring to, who launched this platform in 2008, or this Democratic speaker, or La Raza, or the NAACP. There are a whole number of, or Governor Bill Ritter. I'm not sure who the conservatives are in that frame. But I think this is really a leadership question, which is you took a clean campaign pledge. Your coalition broke that promise. Now, what are you going to do to ensure that promise is kept? Which is, if you're going to lead in this situation, you would, one, say, I denounce this ad and call for them to take it down. Two, if they won't take it down, I'll call the donors that have given to that fund and ask them to withdraw their money. And third, if they don't, I'll ask those coalitions to rescind their endorsement of me. Because either you're going to build a coalition that lives by your values, or you're not. If you're not, either you didn't mean it when you made the promise, or you're not willing to lead in a way that keeps that promise. I think that's the question.
And you would do these things if Frontier Fairness took out an ad that attacked your opponents?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can I reply? Can I just reply, since he talked about the ad?
You can, and then I'm going to get. Yeah, I'm going to right next.
The reason the teachers are bringing these issues up is you sponsored the legislation that requires teachers' performance evaluations be based on their students' performance. And in most cases, almost every case, that's student test scores. It introduced high-stakes testing here in Colorado. The teachers feel demoralized by this. They know there's a lot more going on in their kids' lives than just what's happening in the classroom. Other states that have taken this approach have backed off, and they're absolutely within their right to make that your record and your approach to education in this state available for voters so they can make an informed decision in this race.
So Cary, you supported Senate Bill 191. In 2012, you called it a national model that gives us the tools to drive towards student achievement. So I don't know when you changed your mind on that. It's published under your name. And so I think the question is, it's the school finance partnership that you co-chaired. That was the author of the report, the first paragraph that you authored. So if you changed your mind, that's fine. But I think the question is, and as you know, standards and tests were brought in before Senate Bill 191. That was a totally separate question. So that's actually inaccurate as well. But I think the key here is, are you going to fulfill the promise you made about keeping the campaign pledge, or are you not? And I think the voters deserve to know if you're going to keep promises you make or if you're not.
Mike,
Okay.
I disagree.
I would just say I think this is a bit of a pattern here with Cary Kennedy. Real leaders don't shift responsibility, they take ownership. And for what I can tell, the attack on me was based on an op-ed I wrote almost 20 years ago trying to stop the vilification of then Attorney General Ken Salazar for a bill that Cary was the lobbyist for the organization that was pushing vouchers. So, I mean, how can you be the lobbyist for an organization pushing vouchers and then attack somebody who's voted against them every time they've come up? And I have a 100% voting record. I have an A with the NEA. And it just seems to me it's a failure of leadership to stoop to that level and attack fellow Democrats.
Did you support this legislation back then, though? I think you called it a modest voucher program.
The only connection I had to it is I published at the time 17 years ago an op-ed saying stop vilifying Ken Salazar for supporting this effort. I have a track record of voting against vouchers every time they've come up. Of course I support making sure kids have choice in our public school system, but I've never supported vouchers.
Okay.
You had a question for Donna?
I do not have a question for Donna because you were not in the attack ad, but if you had something you
no,
wanted to
I
add.
was just teasing because I'm not a big fan of bickering. I think leaders don't bicker. I think they go forward. That was all.
And Eric, you're up. No bickering this time.
No bickering. I'll give you a chance on this one as well, Donna, but I want to stay with the education topic.
Okay.
One of the notable pieces of the Democratic Convention a month or more ago in Broomfield was a resolution in the afternoon that was passed criticizing a group called Democrats for Education Reform in very strident terms and going so far as to ask them to cease using the word Democrats in their title. I'd like to get all of your take on A, whether you agree with that resolution, and B, whether you think there is room in this party for these kinds of disagreements about education policy, or whether you agree with that resolution that the time for those disagreements is past. Donna, since you didn't have a chance last time, we'll start with you and then we'll go elsewhere.
Well, first, last I checked, this is America, and you can say what you want to say, and I think that's a good thing. And I think the action to try to strip the word Democrat from that group is not appropriate. I think there is a middle ground on education. I think we can all agree that it's important for us to fund a good public education system, and that there is a need for change. And I agree with Mike that testing came into our conversation long before Senate Bill 191, and I actually sat on what was called House Bill 1202 that really looked at testing in Colorado and how we balance it, because it is a balance. Because to me, testing is about giving tools to teachers, not to rating them. And it is helping the students in a timely manner and dealing with what we have in this state, which is an equity gap. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of disagreement in this group about education funding, because that should be a critical thing that we address right away. But I do object to the resolution, and I think we should be about, our job is to beat the Republicans in November, not to have disagreements amongst ourselves.
Jared, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm proud to have an A from the National Education Association. That's been my rating during my time in Congress, so teachers know what they're going to get, an active advocate. I have a plan at polisforcolorado.com to better compensate teachers, to reduce class size, and to make sure that every child can go to preschool and kindergarten. That's going to be my priority, to end decades of underfunding in our public schools. And you know what? I'm going to welcome a broad constituency to do that. Of course, the business community, Republicans, Democrats, whether Democrats for Education Reform, Teachers Union, they're all at the table. I want to find what we have in common. Let's end decades of underinvestment in our public schools and make sure every kid is ready to succeed.
And Cary, this was a lot of your delegates and supporters who passed this resolution. What do you say to them? Do you support the resolution?
So, Eric, we need to unite behind a common agenda to improve public education. These little fights are holding us back. The real challenge we have here in Colorado is we have the top-ranked economy in the nation, and our investment in education ranks at the bottom among states in K-12 and higher education. We've been cutting school budgets for almost 3 decades. Today, half of the school districts in our state have cut back to a 4-day school week. We pay our teachers among the lowest salaries in the country. In a lot of districts here in Colorado, they can't keep teachers, they can't bring teachers, attract teachers, when we know that teachers the single most important thing to the success of kids in their educational progress. So Colorado should have the best public education system in the country, and we need leadership to get us past these divisive issues, to unite us all around a common agenda of building an education system we can be proud of.
And let me just push for a little bit more of a definitive answer. Is there room in the Democratic Party for a group that espouses the views of Democrats for Education Reform?
It's asking the wrong question. It's fighting the wrong issues. There's room for everybody, but we need to come together around a common agenda.
Michael?
I think leadership is asking the direct question that you asked, which is, or answering the question you asked, which is, no, you should not be able to kick a group out of the Democratic Party because they have different beliefs than someone else. And no, there are young Democrats, there are old Democrats, there are college Democrats, there are Southern Colorado Democrats. You can't go around deciding who you get to strip the term Democrat from because they don't sufficiently meet your criteria. We can always have debates about what we agree on and what we don't agree on. I don't think it's the party's role to kick people out who share a lot of our core platforms. I think the most important issue facing the state is around how do we make sure we can put enough resources in to keep and support teachers. That's why I have a specific plan for repealing Tabor and putting $100 million into teacher pay in year 1 through a state level supplement, because that's the only way you can actually do it that works in the School Finance Act. So I think those things all matter, but I do think part of the job of a leader is to say, no, we're all going to work at the same table together and you can't kick others out because you disagree.
Mike, you actually offer a perfect segue. Our sponsors at ARP have been sponsors of Colorado Decides for many years, so we appreciate them. They have a question for each of our candidates to answer. It's a single question here. Colorado's budget is uniquely constricted by sometimes conflicting constitutional amendments that restrict taxes on one hand and raise them on the other. What ideas do you have for balancing these conflicting amendments so there is adequate revenue available in our state to provide essential services to the rapidly growing number of older adults and their families? Mike, you provide the segment. We'll start with you.
You bet. This is, I think, one of the most important issues facing the state. And if the next governor doesn't solve it, we're going to see 10 years of declining growth in Colorado, and we'll lose the talent and the businesses that we have here. So I think this is why it's so important that a candidate that has committed to do this will win. What I would do is I would propose building a coalition to go to the ballot in 2020 and repeal the refund mechanism in Tabor, which would allow the state to keep the revenue that's generated under the economic recovery. Right now we have one of the fastest growing economies in the country, but that won't actually provide us the revenues to fund schools and roads and bridges because we'll refund it back. That allows us to go to conservative voters and say, we're not asking for a tax increase or an increase in the rates. We're simply asking the state to be able to keep the revenue it generates. That's a coalition that we could pass, and that would put $400 million back into our K-12 system in year 1. So that's what I would do as governor.
Donna, let's mix it up a little bit. Let's let you in the order.
Great. Well, thank you. There's no question we have what is often referred to as the fiscal thicket. We have Gallagher, we have Amendment 23, we have Tabor. And we can't just address one of them. I think we have to bring people together to address all three. And quite frankly, formulas, which is what is common about all of them, whether it's the ratio of residential to commercial property or population plus inflation and our other constitutional amendments, they're just wrong. They are wrong. We've got to really ask leaders, whether they're in the legislature or the governor, to step up and recognize situations are different than they were 25 years ago. And that's what I think I bring to the table, is that ability to open that conversation. When it comes to aging, there is no question we have a large wave of people that are going to move into over 85, even over 100. And one of the things that I'm really proud of was when the Strategic Aging panel made its recommendations. I went to the governor and said, we've got to hire somebody, and we did. We now have within the governor's office a strategic advisor on aging to address housing, to address transportation, to address healthcare, and how that's going to impact our state.
Cary?
So Dominic, people in Colorado are frustrated. They're frustrated that our economy is doing so well, and yet the services that they believe are important to our community success, they see continually getting cut. Cuts in their kids' schools. They're sitting in traffic. They're looking at the state's infrastructure and watching it fall farther and farther behind. And for the elderly, it's cuts in programs as basic as Meals on Wheels. And it is going to take reforming our state's Tabor Amendment, the strictest limitation on spending in the nation that was adopted here almost 25 years ago, in order for us to keep up with the demands of a growing state and meet the needs of people in our communities. I have helped lead the successful statewide efforts that have taken on our Tabor Amendment. Nearly every local government in Colorado, voters have waived out of the caps that are in Tabor. We need to make sure that our state can keep up as our economy grows. You'll see me as governor lead a bipartisan coalition to pass permanent Tabor reform at the ballot so that we can keep these services available in our communities.
Jared, wrapped up.
You know, I think what matters to people is where these issues actually affect people. It's easy to get lost in the intellectual aspects of the conflicts between these different amendments. Gallagher, means the defunding of fire districts. It means it's a real health risk to people. I'm proud to be supported for firefighters for my work on fire prevention, mitigation in northern Colorado, where I represent. We have a lot of both wildfires, and of course, with the dry summer coming, we're all concerned. When you talk about Tabor, it's what's been holding us back from reducing class size and paying teachers better. It's been holding us back from our infrastructure keeping up with where our growth has gone as a state. And you know what? Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or independent, when you're stuck on traffic and your commute that used to take 10 minutes takes 40 minutes, you're frustrated and you want a governor to do something about it. And I think what a governor will need to show as you build a coalition with the business community, Republicans and Democrats, is that this isn't going to be some slush fund for Denver politicians. This will really be exactly prescribed. It's where it's going to go. If you live in Pueblo, you know what it's going to mean. If you live in the Denver metro area, what this investment means for your commute. I want to make sure Front Range Rail is part of it. It's viable today. We can get cars off the road and provide freedom of transportation to even more people at lower costs. So I'll be excited to work with the business community, Republicans and Democrats to get Tabor reform done.
Sean, you're up.
All right. I have a specific question for Cary and a specific question for Jared. I'm sorry, but make these quick. Cary, you're opposed to vouchers, right, in education.
Yes, I am.
And yet you sent your own kids to private school through 8th grade. What do you say to parents who want that same opportunity for their kids, but they can't afford it?
Yeah, so Sean, thanks. And I don't support taking public money, public taxpayer money out of the public education system to send it to private school in the form of vouchers. We've been cutting our public education system's budgets for almost 30 years. We can't take money out of our public system. It leaves the schools and all of the children, the 90+% of kids in our state who attend public school, with diminishing resources. That is not the solution. We need to make a commitment as a state to build an education system that we can all be proud of. This is one of the most exciting opportunities that Colorado has. We have one of the most innovative, forward-looking economies in the country, and we could have an educational pipeline that prepares every one of our kids to succeed, giving them the opportunity for higher level learning and creative thinking skills and problem solving skills, and making that investment and pulling money out of the public schools is not the way to help all kids.
But you understand where some people would say this isn't fair, really. I mean, you send your own kids to private school, but then you say to them, nope, you got to stay in your failing neighborhood school,
yeah,
and we're not going to help you with school choice.
And I feel really lucky. I feel blessed that we were able to send our kids to a school that supported their individual learning needs. And I have worked on this issue my entire career because I believe every one of Colorado's kids deserves that great education.
Jared, we're going to switch gears here. You recently introduced legislation that would repeal the Republican tax law, which you say is a giveaway to special interests in corporate welfare. For 5 years, though, before you entered Congress, you paid no federal income tax and have used onshore and offshore Cayman Island accounts to avoid paying taxes. Critics contend a repeal of that tax reform law would amount to a tax increase of thousands of dollars a year for the average family in Colorado. How do you square you not paying taxes with raising taxes on middle-class families?
Well, first of all, I paid a heck of a lot of taxes in the years I made money. When you don't make money, you can't pay taxes, and since I've been in public service, my expenses have been greater than my income, and that's simply the fact, and I think that's completely appropriate. Look, the Republican convoluted special interest tax giveaway actually raised taxes for many Colorado families. For everyone you talk to that it might save a little, there's another family that costs more, whether it's not being able to write off losses from floods or from fires, or whether it's the fact that they had deductions that they can no longer attribute. What we want to do, and by the way, every Democrat voted against that tax giveaway, and some Republicans voted against that tax giveaway as well, which plunges our nation even deeper into debt. So what do I propose? Instead of that, let's forgive all college debt. That helps a lot more Coloradans than the some Coloradans that are helped or hurt by this ridiculously complicated tax. You'd think Republicans would know how to cut taxes. It's what all they talk about. But they did this tax bill and it actually raises people's taxes. So I know we could do better. Our plan would reduce the deficit. It would expand Pell Grants to help make college more affordable, and it would relieve so many people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s from having to worry about their college debt.
Okay.
I can follow up with some individual questions for both Mike and Donna. Donna, let me start with you. When you became Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, I know on Colorado Inside Out, along with Eric, we talked about, well, one of the things that was probably a popular pick was because that you weren't going to run for governor, that John Hickenlooper probably made that a priority. Then things changed. So when people see that kind of a change, and that maybe, where's your qualifications without a voting record, and especially with being appointed as Lieutenant Governor that was not expected to join this battle?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think the most important qualifications for being the governor is having experience governing, not legislating, not doing something else. And
Is legislating not governing?
Well, it's a different kind of governing. It's very different than running the state of Colorado, which is a $30 billion budget with 31,000 employees. And Governor Hickenlooper made a very intentional pick. He could have picked a lot of people. He had suggestions from people. People approached him. There was a newspaper article, and he said, I want somebody who's got some management experience, as I had, to be in charge of the departments, to really work issues together. A lot's changed in the last 2 years, not just for me, but for everybody in this country. And the fact that Donald Trump is now our president, and we've lost not only, I think, a middle ground and a moral compass, but we've lost civility in leadership. And I think that that is an important part of any leader, is to be respectful of everybody who lives here, to fight for them, and that's what I want to do. So Governor Hickenlooper, as you know, all you have to do is read the Denver Post, privately encouraged me to run for governor, and has said to the Denver Post, I'm the most qualified candidate, Republican or Democrat. So he hesitated to even use the word blessing when I made the announcement because he thought it was inappropriate. But I have not only his support in jumping into this race, but the support of thousands of others.
Mike, let's come to you. One of the things we've been talking about on Fridays about you and your campaign is where most of the donations have come from. The high amount of donations, a lot of money in your coffers, but not from in-state donations, and frankly a lot from organizations sponsored by Michael Bloomberg. Clearly you've made guns an issue. Guns are clearly a divisive issue in Colorado, but they play a lot differently in Yuma or in Grand Junction as they do in Washington Park. So how do you intend, if you become the nominee for the governor of Colorado, to still hold those lines you've made in those commercials, but for voters statewide that may not have a D on their registration title?
Yeah, I think those are the parts of Colorado I'm the most connected. I'm the only one on this stage who is a gun owner. I own 4 guns now. I've owned guns since I was 10, so that's a part of my family upbringing. It's a part of our culture. I understand what those families are. I also feel like all those families that I've spoken to and connected with who are responsible gun owners never felt like they needed a 100-round magazine to hunt an elk, or needed a bump stock to defend their home. So I've found that responsible gun owners on this are willing to take a stand to say, yeah, there are common sense protections we should take, like red flag laws, to make sure that people are protected from gun violence. And I'm very proud of the fact that people like Michael Bloomberg looked around the country and said, are there any Democratic elected officials who've had the courage to actually lead on really tough issues like this and get things done? I'm the only one on the stage who has fought the NRA twice and won twice. And I think I'm not afraid of that issue and not afraid of leading on it. And so I think we have people from around the country who realize this is a moment where states are going to have to lead more than ever. If Washington, D.C. is not going to get change on this, it's the states that are going to lead on it. I've led on it twice in the Senate. I'll lead on it again as governor.
Eric, questions up for you.
If the presidential election a couple years ago had gone differently, as most people anticipated it would, I think there's a substantial likelihood that one of our people on stage today may be the current governor of Colorado, because there was much speculation that John Hickenlooper would have been headed east. The lieutenant governor obviously is a key position, and yet it has become one where we don't know the identity of that person until after we pick a nominee. I have a two-part question for each of you. One is if you would share a couple names on your short list of who you are thinking about for that role. And secondly, what job, or jobs, but I'll take one job, what assignment would you give that person for which they would have a substantial degree of autonomy in your administration? Why don't we start here with Jared?
Well, look, it's a tough question to answer now. This will be one of the first major decisions that whoever the Democratic nominee is has to make going forward. I think we want somebody that can reflect upon my strengths and address diversity. And there's different dimensions to diversity, right? There's gender, there's race, there's geography, there's background. So, we want to find somebody that reflects some of the diversity of that state. And I think we would love to have got a lot of great candidates. If you know anybody who's interested, Eric, send them over. We do have a group that's working on interviewing potential folks, because we know we'll need to roll it out should the Democrats and unaffiliated voters of Colorado give me the nomination.
And what, I take it, you're not going to give us a name. I hope some others might. What role would you anticipate that person leading on?
I would certainly consider some of the other very capable candidates on the stage here, and we'll watch, the integrity with which they run their campaigns in the closing weeks. But I think I would certainly consider the leadership that others that have run statewide campaigns bring. And actually, the role really depends on who the person is, right? Donna is an incredible operator. I mean, she's COO of the state. You might have a lieutenant governor like Joe Garcia, who's a policy expert in a certain area that ran the Colorado Commission on Higher Education. So it's really unique to the person. What I've done in the businesses I built is you want to fit the right person to the right job. And so whoever the lieutenant governor is, I want them to have an active role, and that'll be appropriate to what their background, experience, and vision is.
You're uniquely able to answer this question, Donna?
Well, I could tell you I'm pretty busy right now because I have a full-time job. Actually, I've cut back a little bit, but I am really focused right now on us wrapping up the session. And the governor, as you know, is involved in some deliberations on bills. We are already thinking about our supplemental budget, because that's what we do, and our forecast, and quite frankly, the performance of the state. So I've not given it thought. You know me, I really say what I'm thinking. So there is no short list in my brain. I am really thinking about how I finish strong in this primary and continue to lead the state, whether it's for 7 more months or it's for 8 more years.
Cary, who's your Donna Lynne?
So Eric, if I shared those names with you, they would hear about it on this TV show rather than from me. I don't think that would be appropriate.
The problem is.
But your second part of the question was what would we task them with? What would we ask them to do? And I do think the lieutenant governor plays an important role. I think Donna's done a beautiful job as LG here in Colorado. But one of the areas I'd really like to see my LG work in is in rural communities, is in rural economic development. I hear too often on this campaign about how there are 2 Colorados, the prosperity here on the Front Range, the success of our economy on the Front Range is really contrasted with the struggles that many of our rural communities face. And I would like to see my lieutenant governor spend most of their time out in rural Colorado. I know I'll be there a lot as well, so that we can make sure that our prosperity is enjoyed and benefits everyone in our state and every region in our state.
Mike, you want to bail me out?
I'm going to have to give you some names. Lynn Kennedy Polis. Was that my best answer? Jared took my joke already. No, I would say actually my better joke is I would say like a Donna Garcia, which is like if you were to say, I think what I really admire what John Hickenlooper did about the lieutenant governorship was created as a role with real substantive leadership scope. And I think in Joe Garcia you had someone who both represented diverse parts of the state and different geographic interests and had a policy area of expertise. And I think Donna has real strong management expertise around how you lead and manage complex organizations. And so I think I'd like to look for some combination of those where you have someone who both represents a community that feels like they are not represented right now in the Capitol and does it in a powerful and strong way, but also brings a unique skill set they could use to drive a major part of the $30 billion budget Colorado has forward.
I think there might be somebody out there named Donna Garcia who's
That's
very
true.
excited. You may have Donna's vote. At least Donna Garcia's vote, I know that. Sean, let's go to our next question.
So Well, we can't end the debate without talking about transportation. So you all support a tax increase for transportation, I understand. But how do you convince voters that they should raise taxes in a year when the state just had $1.3 billion in additional revenue? I'm not sure who's first here. Cary, you want to take this?
Yeah, you know, people see the challenges every single day in our transportation networks. About 40% of the lane miles are rated in poor condition, so certainly the rural communities, the ability to move products and goods and people throughout this state. People know we need to modernize this state's infrastructure and transportation infrastructure. I know as a mom that when I got off work and wanted to get home and make dinner for my kids, and like a lot of other parents, you know, you get stuck sitting in traffic and you're not able to get home and enjoy that time with your family. So as our state's population continues to grow, we have to modernize and invest in our transportation system and build a transportation system for the future, because our population is going to continue to grow. So we have to think long term about how we don't not just move cars, but move people, making the investments in transit and in mobility that allow us to enjoy a quality of life here. That's the argument in favor of more revenue for transportation. I think it is important, and I applaud the work that's being done right now by leaders in the business community to bring a proposal forward to the ballot.
Mike, do you think it's going to be a challenge? We've heard so much about the state being flush with cash this year. We've got this surplus, and we're going to go to the ballot and say, can you increase taxes?
I think this is one that people feel every day. I was sitting with a woman who runs a flower shop in Aurora who's been growing gangbusters, and she said, you know, for her deliveries, she had a 10-mile delivery radius. And now over the last week, she's had to cut that radius back to 5, because literally they can't get a 10-mile delivery there and back, and the amount of labor costs and gas costs it takes to do that. And so they've had to contract their business because of this problem. So I think business leaders are the ones saying, this is not a liberal or a conservative issue. This is just that we want to have a functioning government and a functioning infrastructure system. So I think they will do that. It's similar to the question of, you know, you can either decide that we want to fix Tabor and make an investment in schools, or you can decide to pay $250 of school supplies when you get the list in August for what your kids need because the school can't pay for it. We're going to be paying for this one way or the other. I think we'd rather pay for it the wisest and the most effective and the most affordable way, which is to have a statewide investment to solve this $20 billion of infrastructure backlog we have.
Donna?
You know, remember, in this budget that's coming up beginning July 1st, we actually took some money out of general fund to help fund the transportation system, which is fairly unprecedented. Certainly the magnitude of the money, $495 million in the upcoming fiscal year. So we're not simply saying it's just about paying more taxes. We've already got, as you say, some additional revenue. But there's no question there's additional needs besides just what we have in transportation. We've identified some of those. Education. If we want universal health care for all, we're going to have to find that money, and I think we all agree it's a social justice issue. I think we've got to be prudent and thoughtful about how much money we spend. I think at the end of the session, we on the executive branch side were a little worried there was maybe too much spending going on because we do have to save for that rainy day fund. So I don't think the sales tax initiative that is going to be on the ballot is the end of the conversation around what we need to do to bring this state forward. And I think it's prudent. CDOT has identified $9 billion in needs, as you know, for the next 10 years. And we're going to get part of it there, but it's not going to be the whole thing.
Okay. Jared?
Well, I saw Mike's going after the florist vote, but remember, I'm the only retired florist on this stage, and I can build a bouquet faster than he can draw his 4 guns.
I'm peeling them away from you as much
There
as
you go. It's a critical demographic. Yeah. So,
targeted florist.
you know, I think again, when you're frustrated and you're stuck in traffic, I mean, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. It doesn't matter if you love Trump, if you hate Trump. You're stuck in traffic. It's time away from your family. And it's lost productivity for our economy. I think the average basically tax that people are paying is $600 a year in lost productivity just being stuck in traffic. So we can't afford not to take action, frankly. And again, there is a ballot initiative this year, and Donna worked with the legislature and Governor Hickenlooper worked with the legislature, and we'll see whether that happens or not. It's very convoluted, as you know. It ties into a potential ballot initiative this year or next year if this one doesn't pass. But again, our value around transportation, and look at our plan at polisforcolorado.com, is to include multimodal, front range rail, Pueblo to Fort Collins, enable bike commuting like we were able to do in the Highway 36 coalition and corridor, which I worked on and was able to help get the Tiger grants for. So we need to roll up our sleeves, use all funding sources to make sure that we can deliver value to Colorado to keep our economy strong.
I've got what I think is a quick question. You brought up working with others, and that's really one of the key jobs as governor is going to be working with others and crafting some compromises. In today's political landscape, it is natural to believe that the idea that comes from the other side of the aisle has to be terrible. But as governor, you're in charge of making compromises. You're bringing people together. We don't have single party rule. So can you name an idea, a policy, a concept, anything from a Republican that you could agree with? Donna, we'll start with you.
Oh, sure. First of all, I'm really proud of the track record I have. Club 20 just gave me an award called the Building Bridges Award. And of course, predominantly Republican, Western Slope. That's the work that I've been doing. I think that Republicans and Democrats do agree on health care. I think they're concerned.
Universal health care? That's what I've been hearing from all four candidates.
I think they agree on the fact that we're spending too much money on health care. We've got to rein that in, make it affordable for working families. And in fact, I've had Republicans that I've worked with in the legislature in 2017 on bipartisan bills that would have addressed our health care problems. Now, Republican leadership didn't necessarily agree with them, but there are some amazing Republican state senators who said, let's get in this boat and row it together.
Jared?
As part of our plan to get Colorado to 100% renewable energy, I think there's a lot of elements that can actually get bipartisan support. One thing that Republicans are always good for is cutting red tape and regulation. And frankly, when it comes to our public lands, they want to make it too easy to site oil and gas, to develop, etc. But I think there's an area of commonality here. I think we should make it easier around renewable energy projects on public land. So when it comes to putting wind or solar on state land, we ought to expedite the approval process. Let's make it, 4, 5, 6 months, right? We can have a quicker process around meeting our 100% renewable energy goal and work with Republicans and Democrats to cut red tape and get it done.
So do you work with Republicans to put more solar energy on public lands?
Absolutely, to make it easier and reduce red tape around. I have a bill to do that on federal land nationally with a very conservative Republican. It's an idea that I think many Republicans and Democrats will be excited about here in Colorado. I'll cite one example that already happened. When I put out our plan to get to 100% renewable energy, we included allowing distributed storage or batteries to feed energy back onto the grid as part of that. That was a bipartisan bill. Senator Lundberg, one of the most conservative senators, Senator Fenberg, my senator, one of the most progressive senators, they worked together to get that done, and I'm proud to say John Hickenlooper signed that bill. So one of the elements of my plan is crossed off the list, and we're ready to get to work on the other 10.
Cary.
So Dominic, when I served as state treasurer, the state was facing a crisis in rural communities not being able to upgrade and modernize their infrastructure. And I helped build a broad bipartisan coalition, Republican and Democrats coming together, that has invested over $1 billion in rural communities, helping them rebuild their aging school buildings. As we go forward, there's tremendous opportunity for Republican and Democratic leaders to work together, addressing education in our state. That is not a partisan issue. Everybody wants Colorado to have one of the best education systems in the country, and also addressing the impacts of growth. It is something we are all feeling, all experiencing, and I see Republican leaders every day coming forward along with Democrats with strategies going forward so that we can protect our open space, we can protect our public lands, we can protect our air quality and water quality. We will work together on these challenges here in Colorado as we have in the past, and it's one of the reasons why our state is so successful.
Mike.
I think I'm uniquely qualified on this stage on this question. In my 7 years in the Senate, I sponsored and passed more than 120 pieces of legislation. More than 100 of them all have Republican co-sponsors. So I've done this. And if you ask any Republican, they'll say, I'm the candidate they least want to see in a general election and the one they'd probably most like to work with if I won, right? Which is both they can work together across the aisle, but they don't want to see me in a general election. And that goes from things like Rural Jumpstart, which was a piece of legislation I worked on with conservatives from the Western Slope who wanted to help provide incentives to grow business in rural communities across the state. We successfully passed that and got it signed. Or things like trying to solve cold case sex assaults. I worked with George Brockler on legislation to make it easier for us to identify criminals who had committed multiple sex assaults, so we could identify those people and find them. And so I think there are a lot of areas from economic development to criminal justice to education where you can really find bipartisan support, and I've been able to do that.
We're less than 2 minutes away from our closing statement, so I'm going to ask Eric to ask a short answer question so we can
get hopefully have it yes or no's on this one. As you know, I've been involved in the issue of para and para reform for some period of time. Part of the bill that's passed and waiting the governor's signature here has a provision where if you're a court bailiff or a highway worker or a park worker or a higher ed teacher, you have the option of opting into a defined contribution 401 plan, but if you're a public school teacher, you're denied that option. Do you think school teachers should have the same options as other state employees when it comes to choosing between the current para defined benefit plan and a 401k plan? Jared?
I support defined benefits. I think people who've worked hard, who played by the rules, deserve to have the retirement that they've earned and planned for. The truth is, seniors don't have variable expenses. We have their rent, they have their mortgage. So I strongly support making sure that today's people, teachers and others, deserve what they know they're going to get for their retirement.
And no option otherwise?
Again, we have to make sure that the system, overall system, is sound for people.
I think the para compromise was just that, and it was necessary. I support the hard work that a lot of courageous legislators did on that para reform. And look, lawmaking is the old proverbial sausage making. Somehow people pushed to have one group exempt. I'm not sure what the rationale was. Most Americans, as you know, have either nothing or a defined contribution plan that's a 401k plan. I think we've got more work to do on para, but I think this bill is courageous.
Gary.
You know, right now, Eric, teacher pay is so low that we don't have a lot of tools to attract people into the profession, to attract them to coming to this state. I met with the principal of a high school on the Western Slope who said he lost his best math teacher to Wyoming. He's making almost twice as much money for the same job. So I think we need to guarantee retirement security for our teachers as part of their compensation package.
Mike.
So I also support the defined benefit program. I was the chair of the Senate Finance Committee and oversaw para for 7 years, and so we made some significant corrections to that. I think that was important. The compromise I supported, what the para board came out with as a proposal to try to solve some of those problems, I think there was a necessary compromise that was done here. But I think the key is these retirees did not create this problem. They've been working hard for 20 years. What we found was bad policy in the Owens administration was actually what created by allowing folks to buy back years in an accelerated way. So I think there ought to be shared sacrifice to get there, but we want to make sure that those defined benefit programs are protected.
It is time for those closing statements. We drew numbers out of a hat before we began the debate today. Donna, you're up first for your 1-minute closing statement.
Well, thank you. This has been a great opportunity, and I'd like to shift a little bit from policy questions to why I'm running and what I think I bring to the state. Not about experience, because it was great to get validated across this group. You know, I was brought up very working class. My father was in the military. I had to work my way through college. I was a product of public schools, K through 16, didn't have the opportunity to go to private school. And what we're not talking about is what's going on in this state and in this country, which is in spite of low unemployment and lots of new jobs, there's a whole segment that feels very pressed. They feel pressed to afford childcare. They feel pressed to afford daycare. They are pressed to afford health care, and housing, as you know, is a huge issue. I wish we could have gotten into that. And we're not taking care of them. We're not helping them. We don't have a strategy. And that's part of what I fundamentally believe that we have to do in this state. And the next governor has got to take on those important issues as well as the things we've talked about today.
Thank you, Donna. Cary, you're up next for your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I'm proud to have been a part of Colorado's leadership team, including serving as the state treasurer, the chief financial officer, and the deputy mayor for the city of Denver. We're all really proud of Colorado. Our state is innovative and forward-looking. We have one of the fastest growing economies in the country. But in order for our prosperity to reach everyone here in our state, there are 3 things that we need to do here. First, we need to make public education our state's #1 priority. It doesn't make any sense that we have the top-ranked economy in the country and our investment in education, K through 12, and public higher education ranks at the bottom among states. We can do so much better. I will lead on that as my priority as governor. We need to keep healthcare accessible and affordable for everyone in our state. No one should be denied the healthcare that they need, which is why I am calling to offer a public health insurance option. Finally, we need to make sure we manage growth in our state so that we protect everything that we love here, our air, our water, our open space, our public lands. I'm looking forward to serving as Colorado's next governor. Would be so grateful to have your support.
Mike, you're up next for your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you so much. I think it's easy in this moment in history to look around at the news or TV or Twitter or Facebook and ask yourself, wow, like, how did we get here? I think the more compelling question is, how do we get out of here? How do we make sure Colorado is still led by the kind of pragmatic problem solver that can make sure we're able to make big progress on things like education funding and affordable housing and affordable health care? And I think the key question here is who is the candidate that gives us the greatest chance both to win a general election and to be able to actually govern the state to solve these problems. And I think that's one. We did a debate in Colorado Springs last weekend, and the last question they asked the Republican candidates is, who is the Democrat that you would most like to run against? And it was the one thing they unanimously agreed on. They all said Jared Polis, because they think that gives them the best chance to win a general. I think the really important question is who's going to be able to both win a general election, but more important, once you're there, who can actually build the coalitions to solve these hard problems. The 120 pieces of legislation I've sponsored in past, 100 of them with bipartisan support, that shows I can actually get the work done to solve the problems that are ahead of us, and I think that's what matters most in the decisions ahead.
Jared, your last one. 1 minute closing statement.
Thank you. I'm Jared Polis, running for governor. I am the most battle-tested and the candidate who is best to win the governorship here. I've won in counties like Larimer County, where every county elected official is Republican. I've won that county. I've created small businesses and created jobs, and I'm running on the power of bold ideas and a proven track record of real results. I was proud to work with President Obama to pass the Affordable Care Act and work on its implementation. But health care is a human right. And it's not enough to say it, we need to act on it right here in Colorado. That's why I'm the only candidate who supports a Medicare for All model or a common payer across the western states to be one of the first states in a forward-looking, innovative state that finds a way not only to cover everybody, but yes, reduce costs and save you money. I'm running to end decades of underinvestment in our public schools, make sure every child gets a strong start with preschool and kindergarten. And yes, we have a plan to get our state to 100% renewable energy by 2040 or sooner. With Donald Trump going the wrong way in Washington, pulling out of Paris, propping up coal, we need leadership in Colorado to protect our public lands and transition to 100% renewable energy with good green jobs that can never be outsourced. I'd be honored to have your support, and you can find out more at polisforcolorado.com.
That is all the time we have for our debate featuring the Democratic candidates running to become the next governor of Colorado. I'd like to thank all of our candidates, Mike Johnston, Cary Kennedy, Donna Lynne, and Jared Polis. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, Sean Boyd and Eric Sonderman. If you'd like to find out more information about any of this year's primary election races, please visit our websites at CPT12.org, CBSDenver.com, KOANewsRadio.com, and KUNC.org. Remember, primary election day is on June 26th, and it's a mail-in ballot, which means those will be sent out on June 4th. If you're an unaffiliated voter, you can participate in either the Democratic or Republican primary, but not both. I know Lynn Bartles would want me to tell you, if you send in both ballots, neither will be counted. Be sure to tune in next week when we feature the Republicans running to become the next governor of Colorado, Friday at 9 p.m. For everyone here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.